But first, we focus on the feud that is continuing. It erupted this week between the White House and Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, a feud that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. President Trump calling the Florida Democrat wacky on Twitter this morning, and Wilson calling out the president and his chief of staff, John Kelly, for his now debunked accusations about her remarks at a 2015 FBI building dedication.
That's the way he is, and I'm sick of him giving people nicknames. He doesn't want me to give him a nickname. John Kelly is almost, I guess you could say, he was a puppet of the president, and what he was trying to do was divert the attention away from the president onto me, and he basically just lied on me. And I don't appreciate people lying on me. Not only does he owe me an apology, but he owes an apology to the American people, because when he lied on me, he lied to them.
NBC's Mike Viqueira live for us at the White House. And Vic, these are the Congresswoman's boldest remarks just yet about the controversy. And we know that General Kelly had asked reporters to have better sources, and then he comes back a week later and provides information that turns out not to be accurate.
Not accurate, and demonstrably so, after that video surfaced referencing what has become yet another of the side battles here. After all, there are 4 American servicemen who lost their lives in Niger. Sergeant LaDavid Johnson buried just yesterday, of course. That was the genesis, the origin of all of this controversy that has now exploded into a political sideshow. And after all, Thomas, we're talking about some very serious and sacred issues involving the lives of servicemen and women, as well as national security, and many of those questions have not been answered, namely, what is the mission in Niger? How did this particular incident, when these 4 servicemen lost their lives, how did it go down? The back and forth continues. You're absolutely right. President Trump this morning carrying on into a 6th day. Hey, we're heading into a fresh new week. This controversy shows no signs of abating at all. You see the tweet from President Trump earlier today. He's on the golf course now, calling Congressman Wilson wacky, the gift that keeps on giving to the Republican Party, making this an overtly political issue at this point. For her part, you saw Congresswoman Wilson here on MSNBC on AM Joy earlier today, calling Chief of Staff John Kelly, a former 4-star general, a puppet of the president, trying to divert attention from what she sees as President Trump's failures in 9 months in office. And in response to a lot of these slings and arrows, calling her wacky, calling her an empty barrel, as the Chief of Staff here in the West Wing, John Kelly, did in that controversial press conference, she says this is simply character assassination. Thomas?
Mike Viqueira reporting at the White House for us. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Joining us right now is Associated Press White House reporter Catherine Lucey, national political reporter for NBC News Digital, Jonathan Allen, and MSNBC political contributor, Morgan State University professor and politics editor at TheRoot.com, Jason Johnson. Great to have you all here. And Jonathan, let me just start out of the gate with you. As you hear Congresswoman Wilson say that Kelly needs to apologize, you also have several newspapers using their op-eds to suggest the same thing. If Kelly doesn't apologize, is this a problem for his credibility as chief of staff?
I'm not sure that he necessarily ends up needing to apologize to make this controversy go away, but it would certainly help him if the president stopped repicking his fight with Congresswoman Wilson. We'll have to see what John Kelly does and says, but you know, already there was a backtrack from his point of view that a 4-star general shouldn't be questioned, or I guess Sarah Huckabee Sanders had said it that way. You know, this is a controversy that doesn't seem to be going away, and yet you've got a White House that's heading into a big tax debate with, on Capitol Hill, and could be focused on that. Rather, they are continuing to deal with this ongoing controversy.
So we know, Jason, Thursdays have not been a kind day to Chief of Staff Kelly this month. I just want to go over what the headlines have been for Thursdays in October. His personal cell phone compromised on October 5th. That headline came out, something that happened while he was over at Homeland Security. He then declares he's not quitting a week later, and also tells reporters that he recommends they have better sourcing. And then his remarks about Congresswoman Wilson this past Thursday. There is only one Thursday left in this month. So that might be the best news for General Kelly. But is this a bad out-of-the-gate moment for General Kelly when he was just being introduced, taking this more public role so that people could get to know him and what he's doing behind the scenes?
Well, the problem here I see is the presumption that General Kelly was somehow better than what we've seen in the White House already. He's had a terrible, very bad month. But then again, most of this administration has been a series of unfortunate and absolutely avoidable mistakes. I think the greatest problem that we saw with the attack on the member of Congress is this was not a tit for tat. This was not a back and forth. This was a member of Congress expressing her concerns about how the president spoke to a constituent of hers who gave his life for this country, and she was attacked for that. And John Kelly lied, and Trump lied, and it perpetuated their tendency to attack black women in particular, whether it's Jamel Hill, Susan Rice, or April Ryan, and that reflects an overall problem in this administration. So it's a terrible month, but it's a reflection of a terrible administration. I'm not surprised to see this behavior continue.
Meanwhile, Catherine, we have to get more details about what happened in Niger, and we know that we have the Congresswoman saying that this might be this administration's Benghazi. The details are still the big issue here, because we do not know about the mission, how it was authorized, and the purpose.
That's right. And I mean, as this political conflict continues, there is a big question, and there are a lot of questions coming from lawmakers about what exactly happened here. Was there an intelligence failure? Why were they in this location? And we just don't have the answers yet. We don't have a full sort of accounting on what happened. And I think that is a big piece of this going forward into this week. I think it's certainly likely that we could continue to see more of this political conflict, but in theory, we are also going to hear more about more calls for information about what happened and potentially more detail there.
And we know with Senator Lindsey Graham kind of giving hyperbole or rhetoric about what Niger means, or that it's the next hotspot. He was on Meet the Press earlier today, kind of clarifying his remarks about the importance of why we need to have an eye on this part of the world. Take a look.
What happened in Afghanistan is that you had a government that fell, replaced by a radical organization, the Taliban, a government that invited international terrorists in and to be their welcome guest. So what I worry about Africa, it becomes the new platform for people to come to. The ungoverned spaces of Africa is where the terrorists will come after you defeat them in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan.
So, Jonathan, Congresswoman Wilson also said the same thing about putting a better and greater focus on Africa and porous issues there. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's certainly what the conclusion is of our Defense Department and our intelligence community. We can see from where we've had attacks on Americans, whether they be in the State Department, whether they're CIA officers or the military. In Libya a few years ago, you see that in Niger. We've seen attacks in other parts of Africa, Somalia. So obviously this is something that is of great concern to those who most study our vulnerabilities to terrorist actors, and of course the vulnerabilities of other governments to terrorists. So you know, when Senator Graham says that this is the next hotspot and to expect more, not less, U.S. involvement in Africa in the future, you know, I think people ought to listen to that and believe that he knows what he's talking about.
Meanwhile, we have Catherine, the president, continuing this feud with Congresswoman Wilson. Senate Republicans passing a budget proposal, a key step forward on tax reform. Does this really threaten to derail the Republican efforts on tax reform and other legislative initiatives? The big work that needs to be done while people focus on a war of words of Trump and Wilson.
I think what we know is it's certainly a distraction. I mean, we spent a week where most of the attention and a lot of the president's commentary and attention has been on this political fight, rather than what he has stated is his biggest domestic goal, which is doing something around taxes. And I mean, I think what we're looking to now going into this week is that going to change, or is it going to continue? Is it still going to be a big part of the conversation, as opposed to tax policy and how he wants to reform that?
Jason, what about the initiative moving forward? We got earlier a report to NBC, confirmation that the president is going to join a call at 4:30 today to talk about budget and tax reform. We know he's going to be with Senate Republicans on Tuesday. How big of a push can he make in kind of the cult of personality of Trump on this?
Well, he can make a big push. Look, the president's main job is to rally Congress around whatever his agenda is. The problem that many members of Congress have been facing is the president seems so easily distracted, and he also has a tendency to attack the very same people that he's working with. So when he makes this call, it's not just, look, we've got to deliver this new budget. We've got to start pushing through tax reform because that's what we promise our constituents. He's got to make a pledge that he'll have their back, that he won't attack them, that he won't threaten to send someone after them in a primary. Because to be perfectly honest with you, if the Republicans can't get this done now, if they can't get something accomplished in this session, they're not going to do anything next year. That's an election year. And the president needs to be made aware of that. Otherwise, this phone call is going to be a waste of time.
Jason Johnson, Catherine Lucey, Jonathan Allen, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.